Hello everyone, I'm JosieWose and it's time for us to read the Disney movie collection, Planes, Fire and Rescue. I've been looking forward to reading this book to you guys and I hope you enjoy it. Make sure you buy it if you like it and hit subscribe to my channel for more storybook read-alongs. Special shout out to Rachel who requested I read this story. Racing sensation Dusty Crophopper was unstoppable. 3 years had passed since Dusty had won the Wings Around the Globe rally, and he had become a racing legend. He pushed himself hard in race after race, and the fans loved him for it. But Dusty knew he couldn't have done it alone. "I've had an amazing team supporting me every step of the way," he told reporters. When he wasn't racing, Dusty spent his time at home in Propwash Junction, where the annual Corn Festival would soon be held. Dusty and his friends were all excited because the Corn Festival had made national news. Later that day, Skipper, Dusty's coach, was putting the champ through his paces in a training run. Dusty roared through turns and pulled into a steep climb. Suddenly, Dusty's engine was stuttered and he fell into a spin. "Dusty? Dusty, what's wrong?" Skipper asked worriedly. Out of breath, Dusty couldn't answer. "Whoa, steady there," hollered Skipper. Luckily, Dusty regained control and landed safely. Dottie, Dusty's mechanic, had bad news. "Your gearbox is failing," she told him. Even worse, it couldn't be replaced. It was out of production. "You push yourself into the red, you crash," Dottie explained. As she fitted Dusty with a warning gauge, "It comes on and you need to pull power. Slow down," she said. "I'm so sorry." That evening, Dusty was upset. He wanted to prove that he could still be a racer, so he took off into the night sky and sped across the treetops. Suddenly, the warning light flashed and Dusty slowed down. Dusty had been so busy staring at the warning light, he didn't realize that he was flying too close to a tall tower. He clipped the top of it, landed hard, and skidded right into the airport's petrol station. The petrol station's roof collapsed, and one of the pumps exploded. Kaboom! Mayday! The airport's fire engine took aim at the blaze, but his leaky old fire hose didn't do much good. Desperate, he called for volunteers to help pull over the water tower. "Pull!" yelled Mayday. "Pull!" As Mayday, Skipper, Chug and Dusty tugged, the tower creaked and groaned, then fell, sending a wave of water across the tarmac. The fire was out. The next day, 2 safety officials declared Propwash Junction's airport unsafe. No one was allowed to fly in or out. The airport could only be reopened once Mayday's equipment was updated and a second firefighter was found. That meant the Corn Festival would have to be cancelled. Feeling guilty, Dusty headed towards the fire station to see Mayday. One of Mayday's old photos caught Dusty's eye. "Is this you and an old crop duster?" Dusty asked. Mayday explained it was a seat, a single-engine air tanker. Instead of crop dusting, a seat dropped water. Suddenly, Dusty knew what he had to do. He would become Propwash's new firefighter. Bright and early the next day, Dusty flew off towards the air attack base in Piston Peak National Park. Mayday's friend, Blade Ranger, a veteran fire and rescue helicopter, and the head of the base, had agreed to train Dusty. The park was also the home of the magnificent Fusel Lodge. Its grand reopening celebration was just getting underway. The park superintendent, Cad Spinner, welcomed a steady stream of important guests. Dusty landed and rolled to a stop. "Hey guys," he called out. "What's up? I'm Dusty." But no one seemed to notice. They were all doing other things. A plane called Little Dipper was busy sunning herself. She was a super scooper who could swim lakes and scoop up tons of water to drop onto fires and put them out. Windlifter, a mighty heavy lift helicopter, was busy lifting dozens of huge logs. Cabby, a transport plane, was carefully listening to the radio in case an emergency came in, and a group of little trucks called smoke jumpers were playing games. Just then, an emergency horn blared and the air attack base sprang into action. Dusty followed them and saw that Blade Ranger was already on the scene, dumping fire retardant onto the blaze. Blade told Windlifter to drop next. Together, they snuffed out a large part of the wildfire. Cabby flew over the area and the smoke jumpers parachuted to the ground to make sure the fire was out. Back on the base, a mechanic called Maru cleaned Dusty off. "Once you dry out," Glade grumbled, "you can wing it on back to the lodge with the rest of the tourists." Dusty explained he was there for training, not as a tourist. "You're the seat Mayday radioed me about," asked Blade. "Not just some seat," Dipper said. "It's Dusty Crophopper." Blade wasn't impressed. He told Maru to rip off Dusty's landing gear and replace it with pontoons. These would allow Dusty to scoop up water. Dusty's training started at Anchor Lake and began with lessons on how to fill his pontoons. But it wasn't easy. He skipped across the surface of the lake and nearly slammed into the trees. Next, Dusty was taught about different fires and how to fight them. Blade tested Dusty's low-altitude flying at Aragon Canyon. Dusty aced the course, and at the end of the canyon, Dusty had to fly under a bridge, then pull straight up in front of White Wall Falls. But his warning light made him back off. "If you don't push it," Blade warned, "you won't be certified." The next day, Dusty practiced putting out flaming barrels by dropping fire retardant on them. This wasn't easy either. First, Dusty dropped the retardant too late. Then he came in too low. After many tries, putting out just one of the barrels was the best that he could do. Later, Dusty saw smoke rising from the forest. He rushed in and made a perfect drop. Blade grimaced. Dusty had put out a family campfire. "Good job," Blade said. "You just saved those freaks from a nice holiday." That evening, Dusty talked to his friends by radio. They had some good news. They'd found a new gearbox for him. "We'll have it in a couple of days," said Chug. "Wow, thanks. That's the best news," Dusty replied. He couldn't have been happier. Back outside, Dusty met Cad Spinner, the park superintendent. When Cad realized that Dusty was the famous racer, he excitedly invited him to the opening of his hotel, Fusel Lodge. The party was taking place the following evening. Then Cad turned to Blade. "He's even more famous than you, Blazin' Blade." "Blazin' Blade?" Dusty repeated, but Blade simply sighed and rolled off towards his hangar. Later on, Dusty found out from the others that Blazin' Blade was the star of an old TV show called Chops, California Helicopter Patrol. "If Blade was such a big TV star," asked Dusty, "what's he doing here?" Whatever the reason is, it's his business, and we're not asking, said Dynamite, one of the smoke jumpers. Overnight, a lightning storm started several fires. This is a big one, Blade said. Load up. Dusty started to get ready, but Blade told him to stay behind. We need every plane we've got, argued Windlifter. Blade realized that Windlifter was right. They needed Dusty. Blade directed the attack on the fires and soon had the situation under control. But then the wind changed and flames surrounded the smoke jumpers. Dipper was about to release her fire retardant when Dusty zoomed past her and made a drop right on target. The smoke jumpers were safe. Later, Blade had words for Dusty. You broke formation, he said. Don't go planning your certification party yet, champ. As night fell, Dusty, Dipper and Windlifter, still covered in pink fire retardant, arrived at Fusel Lodge for the grand reopening party. Whoa, said Dusty. Look at this place. Dusty, cried Cad. The superintendent wanted to be seen with Dusty to impress the Secretary of the Interior. I'm up for a promotion, Cad explained. Harvey and Winnie, the two elderly RVs who were guests at the lodge, called Dusty and Dipper over. They needed a little help. We honeymooned here 50 years ago, Winnie told them, and Harvey is trying to find the spot where we had our first kiss. That's so sweet, said Dipper. Then she smiled at Dusty. The gang chatted a while longer. Dusty and Dipper worked out that the place they were looking for was Argurin Canyon by Upper White Wall Falls. Later in the evening, Dusty and his new friends talked about firefighting. Maybe this firefighting thing will be a second career for you, Harvey said. You know, said Dipper, this is a second career for all of us. Windlifter was a lumberjack, and I hold cargo. Hearing this gave Dusty hope. Maybe racing wasn't everything. The next morning, Dusty was awoken by his friends from home over the radio. The gearbox they had found was the wrong one. It seemed as though Dusty's racing days were truly over. Moments later, Maru burst into Dusty's hangar. There were 2 new wildfires burning, and they were moving towards Fusel Lodge. Dusty and the firefighters were soon airborne. Maru radioed the lodge, telling Cad to evacuate, but Cad refused. He wouldn't let a little fire ruin his business. As they approached the fire, Blade ordered Dusty to drop only half of his fire retardant. But Dusty wasn't paying attention. He was watching his warning light, thinking of how he would never race again. After Blade dropped his fire retardant, Dusty dumped his too, all of it. Blade was furious. Return to base, he yelled. But Dusty didn't return to base. Instead, he flew down to the surface of Anchor Lake and tried to reload his pontoons. But the lake was too choppy, and Dusty's nose hit the water. My engine stalled, he yelled. Dusty drifted downstream and into the rapids. Blade threw down a line, but it fell short. You need to start your engine. You can take off before the falls, he cried. Dusty managed to start his engine and gave it full throttle, but just as he started to lift off, his warning light flashed, so Dusty slowed down. Why are you holding back? Blade yelled, unaware that Dusty's gearbox was broken. Just then, Dusty went over the falls. Blade swooped in and snagged Dusty in midair. It took all of the rescue helicopter's strength to swing Dusty to safety on the ground. But there was no time to rest. The fire was closing in, fast. Follow me, said Blade. Outside the entrance to an old mine, Blade turned angrily to Dusty. You need to follow orders. I never wanted to be a firefighter anyway, said Dusty. Then go back to racing. Blade answered. I can't, the crop duster admitted. My gearbox is busted. That's why I pulled power. I'm never going to race again. Blade sighed. Life doesn't always go the way you expect it, but you came here to become a firefighter. If you give up today, think of all the lives you won't save tomorrow. Blade and Dusty entered the mine just before the firestorm reached them. Flaming embers and hot smoke swirled around the entrance, and Blade shielded Dusty from the heat. Back at the lodge, Cad was unveiling a special plaque with his face on it. Just then, someone screamed. Flames were racing towards the lodge. The guests panicked and sprinted for the exits. Out on the runway, Pulaski, the lodge's fire engine, tried to keep the evacuation orderly, but a posh jet pulled to the front. Pulaski stopped him and sent him to the back of the line. Blade and Dusty rolled into a field after the fire had moved on, but Blade was badly damaged and crashed on takeoff. Dusty immediately radioed the base. Blade is down, I repeat. Blade is down. Windlifter responded to Dusty's call and carried Blade home. Later, while the rescue chopper rested, Maru told Dusty the reason why Blade had left his television show and come to Piston Peak. Blade's partner on the TV show crashed while doing a stunt. Blade was there, but he didn't know how to help him. His friend never recovered, so Blade left. Blade, he used to pretend to save lives, said Maru. Now he saves them for real. Meanwhile, fire was closing in on the lodge. Cad ordered one of his employees, Andre, to send more water to the rooftop sprinklers. No, said Andre, the firefighters need that water. But Cad cared more about saving his lodge, so he redirected the water himself. At the same time, the Secretary of the Interior was working with Pulaski and Old Jammer, a park worker, to get all the vehicles to safety. Suddenly, a gust of wind sent the fire roaring down the ridge. Debris blocked the only road, and burning trees fell across the tracks. A train that was trying to leave the park came to a screeching halt. We're gonna have to find another way out, the secretary shouted. There is no other way, Old Jammer replied. Back at the base, Windlifter had taken command. The team flew through the fire to get to the road, then took aim at the flames. Windlifter dived down and dropped his fire retardant, a perfect strike. Dipper followed with another precision drop. Finally, Dusty released his retardant, smothering the remaining flames. The fire was out. The guests cheered as the smoke jumpers moved in to open the road. But not all the guests had escaped. Harvey and Winnie were trapped in Argren Canyon. Dusty hurried to help them. Suddenly, Harvey began to slip. Just then, Blade arrived, back in action, and threw a line to hold Harvey in place. Dusty flew as fast as he could. His warning light flashed red, but he kept going. Then he pulled straight up and skimmed the face of White Wall Falls, filling his pontoons with water. With his warning light still flashing, Dusty doused the flames. The RVs rushed to safety as the bridge collapsed behind them. Good move, partner, said Blade. Dusty smiled. But then, ka-chunk! Dusty's gearbox gave out. His propeller stopped turning and he crashed into the forest. A few days later, Dusty, still groggy, rolled out of Maru's hangar. His firefighting friends were there to greet him. Maru had good news for Dusty. Not only had he patched Dusty on the outside, he used spare parts to build him a custom-made gearbox. I'd say you earned that certification, said Blade. Dusty cranked the engine and his propellers sprang to life. After his daring adventure, Dusty was glad to get home. While he was away, Dottie had completely updated Mayday. Now that Propwash had its 2 certified firefighters, it was open for business again. The Corn Festival quickly got into full swing. Chug got on the loudspeaker. Ladies and gentleplates, the Propwash Junction Corn Fest is proud to present the Piston Peak Air Attack Team and our very own Dusty Crophopper. Thanks for reading with me, everyone. If you liked this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more videos just like it, and buy the book so you can read along with me. I'm JosieWose and I'll see you next time. Bye!